You've felt it, that charge in the air when your energies collide, the way his presence lingers in your body long after he's gone. And yet, the words never fully land. Why? Because this isn't just love, it's exposure. Once it's spoken, there's no going back. The masculine fears crossing that line. The feminine feels the weight of naming what can't be undone. Both are guarding something they believe is fragile, not realizing the truth is the only thing strong enough to set them free. So the silence lingers until one of you dares to break it. You know that moment when you lock eyes and suddenly the air between you changes. It's not just attraction. It's not just chemistry. It's that deep magnetic pull, the one that feels like your souls are speaking in a language older than this lifetime. Your body feels it before your mind can process it. The subtle charge in your chest, the warmth in your skin, the way the world seems to go quieter so the connection can be louder. But here's the truth most won't admit. With that pull comes fear, not a fear of them, but of what this will require from you. Because deep down, you know that the kind of love this bond carries isn't the safe, controllable type. It's the kind that dismantles walls you've been building for years. And while your soul craves it, your human self hesitates, because stepping into it means there's no way back to before. For the masculine, this pull feels like a current he can't swim against. And yet he tries. He distracts himself. He retreats. He convinces himself it's timing, circumstance, or the need for more healing before he can meet you here. But beneath those reasons is the unspoken truth. The moment he fully admits what he feels, he knows the game changes forever. He can't pretend it's casual. He can't hide behind distance. For the feminine, the pull is equally undeniable, but she feels it like an ache to merge and a caution to protect. She's been here before, with love that promised depth but couldn't hold it. She knows that naming this connection out loud is like striking a match in a dry forest. Once the fire starts, there's no stopping it. And so even she hesitates, not because she doubts the love, but because she senses the magnitude of what will unfold. This is why silence becomes the unspoken agreement. It's not that you don't feel enough to speak, it's that you feel too much. The ego, the old wounds, the fear of being fully seen, all rush in to put padding between you and the truth. The mind says, if I don't speak it, I can still hold it in a way that feels safe. But the soul knows that safety was never the point. The point is freedom. And here's the paradox. The pull is the very proof you're ready. If your hearts weren't prepared on some level, the universe wouldn't allow this collision. But readiness doesn't erase fear. It simply asks that you recognize it and still choose to step forward. Every time your eyes meet, every time his name crosses your mind out of nowhere, every time your body feels that familiar rush, it's an invitation. The connection is already here. It's already breathing between you. The question is, will you let it speak? Because eventually, the pull becomes louder than the fear. And when it does, that's when everything changes. Silence can feel like a sanctuary, a dim, holy room where nothing breaks, nothing spills, and nothing has to be decided. You hold the connection there like a fragile relic, precious, untouchable, safe from the clumsiness of words. Every glance becomes a paragraph. Every brush of skin becomes a confession. Every shared breath says what your mouths won't dare to speak. And for a while, it works. The mystery protects you. The unknown feels romantic. The unsaid feels sacred. Over time, though, the same silence that once felt protective begins to tighten around your chest. What looked like reverence starts to taste like avoidance. The bond isn't asking for perfection, it's asking for presence. And presence eventually requires language, not speeches, not scripts, just honest sound. For the masculine, silence often resembles control. If he never names what this area is, he can pretend there's still room to maneuver. He can keep one foot in the life that feels safe, while the other tests the pull of something he can't rationalize. He calls it timing, logistics, responsibility, protection. Under those reasons lives a quieter truth. Naming the bond would collapse the distance between who he is and who he must become. Once spoken, he knows there is no path back to numbness. His system senses the scale of what's being asked. Accountability, vulnerability, spiritual honesty. So he stays quiet, hoping the intensity will subside. It doesn't. It grows. For the feminine, silence becomes a shield for the sacred. Her body already knows. Goosebumps arrive without invitation. The belly pulls with a gravity that isn't mere desire. The heart beats with a recognition older than this lifetime. Still, she swallows the words. She's learned that naming the truth can force a crossroads, and she refuses to drag anyone there. She doesn't want to be met with hesitation or a retreat that feels final. So she lets the field speak for her and calls it surrender, though some days it's closer to fear. Silence pretends to be a guardian, but slowly becomes a gatekeeper. It keeps the bond in a hallway, between doors, between timelines, between versions of you that are no longer true. In that hallway, projection multiplies. The mind fills gaps with old stories. If he doesn't say it, he doesn't feel it. If I say it, I'll scare him away. If we keep this unspoken, it will somehow stay pure. Purity without truth curdles into anxiety. You start reading tea leaves in text bubbles, scanning pauses for meaning, turning delays into verdicts. The love is still present, but the static grows louder. Listen closely. Your soul is not fragile. The truth will not break what is real. It will only break what was built on performance. The bond isn't asking for a perfect declaration. It's asking for clean contact. The first trembling syllables that say, "Something is here. I feel it. I'm willing to meet it in honesty." The body tenses before the words because language is a threshold. Once crossed, the ego loses its last place to hide. But thresholds are where destinies change. When truth touches air, the field organizes. What belongs draws nearer. What doesn't loosens its grip. That is not loss. That is alignment. There is a difference between protecting what is sacred and protecting your fear. Silence that honors timing feels like soft spaciousness. Silence that protects fear feels like constriction. One expands your breath, the other steals it. Your nervous system knows the difference. If the quiet inside you is calm, wait. If it's tight, name something gently, simply, without demand. You don't need an outcome to speak clearly. Clarity is not a contract, it's a mirror. Clarity says, I experience a profound connection here. Clarity says, I want to meet it with honesty. Clarity says, I am willing to be seen, and I will not abandon myself if our truths diverge. That kind of language doesn't chase, it doesn't test. It opens a door and lets the field decide what can walk through. For the masculine, truth becomes initiation rather than romance. It is the moment he stops outsourcing timing to fate and begins owning his presence. He doesn't need to overpromise. He needs to stop hiding. For the feminine, truth becomes sovereignty rather than pursuit. Her voice rings like a bell, not a net. She speaks to witness, not to win. She remembers that her words are most magnetic when they carry no agenda. Eventually, silence stops feeling holy and starts feeling like self-betrayal. You notice it in the microaches. The message you don't send because you fear its power. The conversation you avoid because it would end the limbo. The way you lie awake, translating pauses into prophecies. Your soul isn't asking for more decoding. It's asking for daylight. Daylight doesn't guarantee union, it guarantees integrity. It clears the fog so both of you can see whether you are standing on the same ground. If you are, next steps become obvious without force. If you aren't, the dignity of truth will protect your heart more beautifully than 1,000 unspoken hopes. The real risk was never speaking. The real risk was spending a sacred connection on half light and maybe some days. You didn't come this far to live in parentheses. You came to live in bold. If your body has been humming with unsaid sentences, if the pauses feel heavier than the words they hold, if the hallway has grown too narrow to breathe, this is your sign. Not to perform, not to confess with an agenda, to let the truth have air. Say the clean thing, let it ring, trust the field. If it's real, truth will deepen it. If it's not, truth will free you. Either way, love, true love, moves closer. When the divine masculine feels the magnitude of a twin flame connection, it doesn't just touch his heart, it shakes the foundation of his identity. In the early stages, he may interpret the intensity as something to enjoy cautiously, like a rare flame that could burn too fast if not controlled. But as the bond deepens, it becomes clear that this isn't just attraction or emotional attachment. It's a full, energetic merging. And that's when his protective instincts activate. To him, speaking the truth of what he feels isn't a simple declaration. It's a crossing point. Once those words leave his mouth, there's no safe retreat to the life he had before you. That life, the predictable, the manageable, the version of himself he's come to know, begins to crumble the moment the truth is spoken. And the masculine, conditioned to find security in control, sees that as a risk he may not yet be ready to take. This is why silence can feel safer. It allows him to keep the connection alive without confronting the changes it demands. In silence, he can delay the reckoning. He can hold on to you in the energetic sense while avoiding the actions, decisions, and shifts that might expose just how much he's already been changed. It's not that he doesn't feel you, it's that he feels you too much. And in his mind, that level of feeling requires readiness he isn't sure he has yet. The truth is, this hesitation rarely comes from doubting you. More often, it comes from doubting himself. He questions if he can stand in his fullness without collapsing under the weight of your presence. Can he meet your frequency without losing himself? Can he sustain the man he knows he will have to become once you're truly in his life? These questions aren't casual. They press on every old wound, every unfinished healing, every shadow he thought he'd already handled. This is where the ego steps in, disguising fear as logic. It whispers about timing and preparation, convincing him that holding back is an act of wisdom, not avoidance. And yet, beneath that, the soul is restless, because it knows the truth. No amount of preparation will feel enough, and no perfect timing will ever come. For the feminine, this silence can feel like rejection, but it's essential to remember it isn't the absence of love. In fact, it's often the opposite. His heart is overwhelmed precisely because it recognizes the scale of what this connection means. The masculine isn't ignoring the bond. He's negotiating with it. He's asking himself whether he can survive the transformation it's demanding. But here's the key shift. When the masculine finally realizes that vulnerability doesn't strip him of strength, but anchors it, the entire dynamic changes. Speaking the truth doesn't dissolve his stability. It becomes the foundation for something far stronger. His voice becomes a bridge, not a breaking point. And when he chooses to speak, it often won't be with dramatic proclamations or perfectly formed promises. It will come in fragments, raw, unpolished, but undeniably real. A quiet confession in the middle of an ordinary moment. A truth slipped between breaths when he can't hold it anymore. These aren't small moments, they're seismic shifts. Because in those moments, he's not just telling you how he feels, he's stepping into the man this connection has been calling forward all along. The feminine's role here is not to force the words, but to remain rooted in her own truth, embodying the very energy that called this awakening into motion. Your steadiness, your self-trust, and your refusal to shrink into his silence are what make it possible for him to meet you in honesty. The connection doesn't need pressure, it needs space. And in that space, his courage grows. One day, the words will break through. And when they do, they won't just confirm what you've always known. They will mark the moment he stops protecting himself from the love that was always meant to set him free. For the divine feminine, the masculine's silence can feel like an unspoken verdict, something that presses against her chest in moments when she least expects it. It's not just the absence of words she notices, but the presence of energy that still lingers between them. She can feel him in her body, in her thoughts, in those strange bursts of emotion that have no logical explanation. The bond is alive, and yet the human part of her craves confirmation. The temptation rises to reach for him, to send the message, to bridge the gap before it becomes too wide. This is where her greatest test emerges. The choice between acting from fear or standing in trust. Because even though it feels like action will relieve the ache, there's a hidden cost. The more she pushes against the silence, the stronger it becomes. Every attempt to close the distance risks pulling her out of her own alignment, and the moment she abandons her center, the bond feels different, not because it's weaker, but because she's no longer meeting it from a place of sovereignty. True feminine power does not bloom in pursuit. It blooms in presence. She is magnetic not when she is chasing, but when she is rooted in the energy that called him in the first place. This is why her stillness is not inaction. It is an active choice to remain in her own frequency, to hold space for him without gripping it. In this way, she becomes the mirror that reflects both his readiness and his resistance. But this isn't easy. It means learning to feel the pull without acting on it impulsively. It means hearing the ego's fears. What if he forgets you? What if the connection fades? What if he never speaks? And refusing to make decisions from that place. Instead, she allows those fears to pass like weather, knowing that beneath them is the deeper truth. The bond is not fragile. It doesn't dissolve in silence. The feminine's challenge is to remain open while honoring her boundaries, to resist the urge to fill the space with over-explaining, overreaching, or overgiving in hopes of coaxing a response. Her openness is not about making herself endlessly available. It's about holding her heart in her own hands and refusing to abandon it for the sake of temporary reassurance. And here's the paradox that so many miss. Her stillness is the very thing that invites him forward. When she stops trying to pull him closer, he feels the space to move toward her without pressure. That space is freedom. Freedom to process, to face his own shadows, to choose to step in not because he's been cornered by expectation, but because he wants to. When she holds her truth without shrinking, she sends an unshakable signal through the bond. I am whole. I am here. I am not waiting in pieces for you to make me complete. This is the energy that pulls him, not desperation, not persuasion, but sovereignty. And when he feels that, it doesn't create distance, it creates intrigue. It awakens the part of him that wants to meet her in that same freedom. In the end, the feminine's task is not to get the masculine to speak. It's to trust that when he does, it will be because his soul has chosen the moment. And that kind of truth, born in freedom rather than force, is the kind that lasts. Her work is to remain in the energy that called him in, to be the sanctuary he can return to without feeling trapped. That is how openness becomes strength, and how love survives the quiet without losing its fire. There comes a point in every twin flame journey where the tension between what's felt and what's unspoken becomes impossible to sustain. You've both been circling the truth for so long, feeling it in the way your energy spikes when he thinks of you, in the way your body softens when you sense him letting his guard down. But up until now, the weight of silence has been the unspoken agreement. It's been the safe space where neither of you has to face what happens once the truth is said out loud. And yet, the truth has been moving under the surface the whole time. It shows up in his small shifts, the extra second his gaze lingers, the sudden change in his breathing when you're near, the way he doesn't disappear as quickly from your energy field. You notice it in yourself too, how your own heart rate calms when you imagine him choosing honesty over protection, how you find yourself no longer clinging to the when because you've started to feel the how unfolding on its own. The breakthrough moment rarely happens as a grand, cinematic confession. More often, it's a fracture in the wall you both built, a text sent at an odd hour, not to discuss logistics, but to test the water, a subtle admission in the middle of a conversation about something entirely different. A sentence that begins casually but lands like lightning in your chest. The tone shifts, the air changes, and suddenly you both know you've crossed the invisible line and there's no going back. For the masculine, this moment comes when the cost of holding it in outweighs the fear of what happens next. It's when the truth inside him becomes too heavy to keep hidden, when he realizes the silence has started to feel more like a cage than a shield. For the feminine, it's the point where her stillness has created so much space that he feels safe enough to step into it without fear of being swallowed. But here's the key. The breakthrough only sticks if it's met without force. If the feminine pounces on the moment with demands or tries to turn a doorway into an interrogation, the masculine's instinct to retreat will flare back up. This is where her presence becomes the grounding force, receiving the truth with openness rather than control. That's when the connection deepens, because the moment isn't just about words. It's about what those words unlock in the body, in the soul, in the shared frequency. The breakthrough is less about finally talking and more about stepping into a new energy together, one where hiding is no longer the default, where vulnerability is allowed to coexist with attraction, where love stops being the thing you tiptoe around and starts being the thing you both live inside of. Once you've tasted that, it's not just harder to go back, it's impossible. Union doesn't begin the day two people decide to be together. It begins the moment both souls stop hiding. When the softest, most unguarded truth crosses the threshold of your lips, the energy reorganizes. The field stops circling and starts aligning. The bond you've felt in silence is finally given a place to land. Truth is not a performance, it's a permission. It gives your nervous system the relief of no longer carrying a secret it wasn't meant to hold alone. It gives the other a clear mirror instead of a fogged window. It gives the connection oxygen. You don't have to deliver perfect language or an immaculate confession. You only have to let your soul speak without bargaining for a guarantee. The ego will try to negotiate. It will bargain for timing, tone, and outcomes. It will ask for certainty before a single word is said, because the ego mistakes exposure for danger. But your soul knows that the only danger is living indefinitely in half-light. The longer the truth stays trapped inside, the more it distorts into stories, projections, and fears that were never yours to carry. For the masculine, speaking is an initiation into presence. Silence once felt like control, a way to keep one foot in safety while the other tested the current. But the moment he tells the truth, the bridge back to numbness burns. And that is exactly what makes room for him to stand in who he really is. He isn't required to promise a lifetime, fix the past, or craft a flawless plan. He is required to stop hiding from the frequency that has been reshaping him in private. For the feminine, speaking is an initiation into sovereignty. Openness is not the same as pursuit, and receptivity is not the same as self-abandonment. Her truth lands clean when she refuses to package it to be easier to hold. She can name what is real without corralling the other into instant certainty. She can let her voice ring like a bell in the field, not as a hook to pull him closer, but as a tone that clarifies the space between them. Truth is not loud, but it's undeniable. The body recognizes it. Shoulders drop, breaths deepen. The subtle panic of "what are we?" loosens its grip because the connection is no longer required to prove itself. It is allowed to be seen. If the reality is alignment, the words create a path. If the reality is divergence, the words create mercy. Either way, truth protects what is sacred by refusing to build intimacy on guesswork. There is a difference between timing and avoidance. Sacred timing is spacious, steady, and alive. It softens your belly and widens your breath. Avoidance is tight and brittle. It asks you to contort yourself around the unknown until you don't recognize your own posture. When you speak, you aren't destroying mystery. You are dismantling confusion. Mystery can live alongside clarity. confusion cannot. The fear that truth will break what is real is a myth born from past wounds. What truth actually breaks are the props, the roles you play to be safe, the careful vagueness that keeps you both from the center, the polite rehearsals that never let your hearts touch fully. The bond doesn't need props. It needs contact. When truth touches air, the field reveals what it can hold, and your bodies finally stop bracing for impact. Allow the words to be simple. No pleading, no proof, no posturing. Something here is undeniable in me. I want to meet this with honesty. I am willing to be seen, and I will not abandon myself. These are not ultimatums. They are invitations. They create a doorway the other can step through at the pace of their integrity. They create a doorway you can step through even if you must walk on alone. If you're waiting for the perfect moment, know this: perfect moments are made by honest ones. The calendar date won't save you from trembling. The rightness you seek arrives because you were brave, not before you are. When the words finally cross your lips, you may still shake. Let yourself. Trembling is not a sign you're wrong. It's a sign your body understands the magnitude of choosing truth over control. And if the response you receive is unsure, remember that uncertainty is not disrespect. Not everyone learned how to speak from the heart in real time. Give the truth room to echo. Let the field do some of the work. You are not responsible for managing another soul's awakening. You are responsible for honoring your own. Union begins here because truth collapses the distance between your inner world and your shared world. It ends the negotiation with what you already know. It ends the self-betrayal of making yourself smaller to keep the peace of a silence that doesn't actually soothe you. It ends the waiting that pretends to be spiritual when in your bones you know it has become avoidance. So let the words come. Let them be tender and unornamented. Let them land where they will. If this love is the home you both have been building in the unseen, truth will open the door. If it is not, truth will open in another. Either way, you return to yourself, and from there to the kind of union that can only be built on light you aren't afraid to turn on. Speaking the truth is not the last step. It's the first act of union. And once you have chosen it, nothing that belongs to you will require you to hide again.